Check, check, check. Okay, it's working. All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the internet, and we're here at the Museum of Glass today. Hopefully some people will show up. It's a little slow so far, but anyways, I'm here running everything today. Normally there's someone helping, so I've got to double-check all this stuff, so forgive the delay here. Today we have, again, another installment of the great saxophonist, educator, composer, world traveler, the great Tracy Knoop. Tracy, thanks for being here.
My pleasure, Kareem. Happy Father's Day.
Yes, likewise. I was going to say, this kind of works out well because you're one of my musical fathers, so this is a perfect way to spend the interview series when it actually falls on Father's Day. So, as per usual, I'd like to start off by thanking our sponsors. Again, that's, of course, the Museum of Glass, KNKX, Ted Brown Music, Tacoma Creates, Titusville Cars, BCRA Design, and Edward Jones financial consultant Rick Gray. And, of course, all of you that tune in to watch these things and come out to the concerts, that all helps support this. So thank you so much for making this possible. So, Tracy, again, thanks for being here.
Of course.
It's always a pleasure. And we've had a few conversations on these things, so we can kind of go lots of directions now. And for those of you who haven't got the chance to know Tracy or hear his music, there's a couple of these interviews that we've already done online that you can check out, which talks more about how he started playing and where he grew up and all of the many things that he's done with music around the world so far. We're going to dig in a little bit more today and talk more about all these things. So I want to talk to you a little bit about college education and music. Now, you've been teaching at UPS, University of Puget Sound in Tacoma, Washington. How many years now?
I think 10. Yeah.
Okay, and you yourself, you attended the Berklee School of Music in Boston in the 1970s?
Well, 1980 to 84. Yeah.
Okay, 80 to 84. Okay. So and I know we're talking about totally different schools,
Yep.
where Berklee is much more known as a music conservatory, and University of Puget Sound is as well, but not at the same
Volume.
Yeah,
I would say.
definitely. So, which is kind of tough to look at it through the same lens, but can you talk about, maybe compare and contrast what your college education was and the expectations were for you as a young music student then attending school as a young musician at Berklee versus the students' experience that they would maybe have at University of Puget Sound now?
Yeah, well, I think, Berklee School of Music, New England School of Music, all those schools, conservatories, I would call them, especially at that time. Only say that because Berklee's broadened its horizons a lot since I was there. They're much more into music recording, writing, production than when I was there. When I was there, it was pretty much a learn to play school. I mean, in addition to learning harmony, and there was composition, of course, but mostly people there went there to learn from great teachers. In my case, there was many, but Joe Viola, Jimmy Mosher, Billy Pierce was there at the end. I had lots of great teachers. But you went there to learn to play, pretty much strictly. They did have they weren't even accredited the first year I was there, so they didn't even have a bachelor degree program until the following year. But yeah, people went there to hang out with great musicians, to be in an environment of people that really wanted to play every day. Be in a metropolitan area that had a lot of music, a big music scene going on. And it was a school that leaders of bands, that's how I got hired to be on the Tommy Dorsey band. But Art Blakey would hire musicians, young musicians, Maynard Ferguson. That's kind of where they went, there, North Texas State. So that environment is much different than these, like University of Puget Sound, PLU, which is, liberal arts education, really fine teaching faculty at the University of Puget Sound and, likewise PLU, but a much, much, much broader kind of education. The music students, I didn't take many math courses, any English courses, any science courses, not a one. And that's a good thing because I wouldn't have made it through those too well. With all the tutoring in the world, I'm afraid. But it's a much broader education, just social in every way. So these students, they work hard at the music majors that are at the University of Puget Sound, mostly music ed majors. are doing all those other things. But they work hard at music, but they don't have, I don't feel like with a liberal arts education, comparatively speaking, as opposed to a conservatory of music, or even a really large music. I mean, UPS's population this year was only 2,300. That's small. I mean, Berklee's was maybe 2,500 when I was there, but they were all music students, you know. So they put in the time, they do, at UPS, but they've got lots of other things to deal with. So in fact, I hear them say, I don't really have time to practice the way I want to because I got to do my science, math, you know. And looking back, thinking about my education, which I've done a lot, I've often wondered, did I miss the boat? Maybe I would have liked to have some of that other education. Now, you can't get it later in life, usually through trial and error, but it's a delicate balance. You know, if you're going to go to a school that's conservatory, you have to music's got to be it. It's like what you live and breathe and die for. Your only social outlet really is with other musicians. I'm not sure that's the healthiest thing either, always. I think there's better answers as far as balance. And in today's world, I think the 20 to 30-year-olds, I think balance is as important as music is to them. So they don't want to just have necessarily. There's still some that just only want music to be their only thing in their life. But I think they've got to these days they've got to figure out in another way. And I think the balance, social balance that they figured out, is pretty healthy. Does it affect the way they play? They're still great players. It's just maybe not quite as versed at a young age, maybe, I guess I would say.
Well, I guess that many questions that I have based on several of the things that you just said. As someone who's, I mean, you're older than me, and that's not a dig, it's a fact.
It's a fact.
As someone who's lived and gotten the opportunity to play with a lot of these great musicians, the first one that comes to mind is Mel Torme. Yep. You know, is a lifelong career as an entertainer and a brilliant musician. Yep. And countless others that you've got to socialize with and perform with. Do you think the current level of students and that balance that they have to have and the fact that they don't have the time to practice or have that environment to be in, do you think that affects the quality of the music and the caliber of the musicianship?
Well, it's a delicate question. First of all, the music business isn't what it was when I was their age. So they don't necessarily have to walk on and do it in the moment, right in the moment. They've got time to work it out. I think as long as they have a little extra time to work through things, I think that it's pretty level playing field. If they don't, I think that experience can be frightful. But it's definitely different. It's a delicate question. I know there's just a lot of very young, talented musicians out there. And by young, I mean you could be 50 and be young and musically, you know. But I would say there's not as many people at that kind of, I'm ready to play professionally on a big stage. And make my living doing it strictly, which is barely possible now. I mean, it is for a handful of greats, you know, I guess, and maybe some not. But you know, it's just such a different environment these days, musically, and every other way, too. It's a hard question to answer. I think there's plenty of really great young players. I really do. I do.
Fair. So, being in this Father's Day, let's go this direction. Being a full-time musician, whatever that looks like in 2023, and I know that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
Yes, it does.
Being a full-time musician and raising a family. Your thoughts and opinions about this? Again, it can go any direction.
Yeah,
here. There's a lot.
Well, there's a lot. You know, I started having a family maybe a little later than I think it was 35 when Parker was born. And I'd already had all my time on the road. But I was still playing a lot at that age, but teaching a lot too. And so that gave me the stability, which is the one thing. I mean, I hate to say it, but you have to, if you're going to raise a family, however your family looks, you have to have financial stability. You have to. I mean, it's pretty important. And so you have to be able to do lots of different things. And then the hardest part about it, I would say, is balancing the time away from your family. I think you could probably attest to this. It's hard. Of course you want to be with your family. You want to play to, you know, can you have both? Of course you can. But again, this is where that balance part comes in. I mean, I was rarely home for dinner at night. My kid's mom, you know, didn't like that a lot after a while, and I understand. But I had no choice. I mean, I had to put a roof over their heads and feed them and clothe them, and it's very difficult. So if you know, you have to, if you really want to be successful, you got to figure out time. You can't buy time. You can't buy it. You know. So you have to figure out a way, and it's probably a little easier these days, actually, because you can be more creative online with social media to not necessarily have to be out of the house all the time. During the pandemic, I mean, you know, teaching at home. I mean, it's not my favorite way of teaching, but I think I just posted something the other day, like, it has opened up the world to me. Like, I teach people in Chile, and I'm learning about music that I never knew anything about. Well, I still don't know anything about it, but I'm working on it. But I think the balance, again, the balance thing is crucially important, because of course you want to be with your family, and of course your family supports you and your musical ambitions. I was just great about a month and a half ago. The Tommy Dorsey band was at Royal Hall, and my boys had flown in to see their grandmother. And I hadn't played with the band probably in, I don't know, 7, 8 years. But they got to come to see Daddy-O. They'd seen me play with, you know, the band when they were really young, on another trip that the band made out here. But they were like, "Wow, Dad, you really know how to play that thing." I'm like, "Well, okay, guys, thanks." You remember that private school? Remember that? That's how we got there, you know.
Well, I heard I can't remember if you told me this or someone else, but you played on that band before leaving the band and initially coming back and starting to teach. How long had you been on the road with the Tommy Dorsey band?
10 years.
And because I remember, because when you got off the road, I was one of your first students. This would have been like 92,
Yep.
93?
That's about right.
Somewhere?
Mhm.
Okay. And then I heard that the band had come through town. This was in the last 10 years or so, not the recent one, but before that. And they asked you to come play. And you went and played the show without any music? Like you had all the music
some
memorized?
charts were missing, and the gentleman that was playing lead alto, you know, I guess he'd not been with the band longer. I don't remember if maybe I can't remember exactly, but some charts were missing. And I said, well, what charts were they? And he mentioned, I said, "Oh, I got it." And so I played them, and he said, "How'd you do that?" I said, "Well, you know, when you play 300 shows, 10 nights, 10 for 10 years, 300 shows a year for 10 years, if you haven't memorized the music, maybe you should consider selling insurance. You know, maybe you should consider another profession." So it was just, you know, and the same when I played with them this time, it's like it all came roaring right back. And, yeah, it was like I never left the band. You know, it really, and one other thing I would say is, you know, you can, and I used to feel this way, you know, because I was, you know, 20-something when I was on the band, and we play the same stuff every night, blah, blah. Well, there's something to creating that kind of energy that makes it sound like you're playing it for the first time. And because the audience doesn't care if you played it 500 times, they want to hear it the way it's meant to be played, at a certain level that's, you know, takes a lot of energy. So I think, you know, people say, and I'm sure you've heard this, "Well, of course it's easy for you, Tracy, you're talented." I said, no. I mean, talent's, you know, lots of people have talent. Talent's the cheapest commodity in the world as far as I'm concerned. The one thing maybe I was born with was a strong musical memory. I think maybe that's true. That's helpful. Playing those tunes every night, though, helped hone that musical memory. It taught you how to learn and remember both mistakes and not, you know. But like, it's musical memory is a very strong thing. Being able to remember tunes, being able to remember hear in your ear what sounds that you can recreate from your memory because you've heard it so many times. So yeah, but yeah, that's a true story. Yeah.
But also those parts, knowing all those parts and memorizing all those parts are going to inform you as an improviser and as a composer,
That's
having
very
all
true.
those things that you can call upon.
Very true, and playing a lot of tunes, because there's a vocalist with the band. Learning for the first time, I listened to Ella and Sarah and Chet Baker, and so I listened to some vocalists, but yeah, learning the lyrics, learning tunes, old tunes that are beautiful. Street of Dreams, Don't Worry About Me, I Want to Be Around. I mean, people don't play these tunes at sessions, but they're beautiful tunes. Yes, they are. Wagon Wheels. I mean, the list is huge. But tunes that I would have never, I want to play like Charlie Parker. I still do. But yeah, so really, and opening up your ears to that whole sort of thing also. Also understanding that, because we play a lot of concerts, but in the day we also play like 4-hour dances. And, playing for people that want to be out there dancing and having fun. And realizing, geez, they don't want to hear me play Cherokee? Well, we can't dance Cherokee now, can we? Well, I mean, I guess you could if you were really good. But moving away from being such a purist, which I really was, and pretty jerky about it in retrospect, I have to admit. But we're working on that. But, if you have a crowd, you should, make them happy. If you want to, continue to play and have an audience and make money, if you just play for you and you don't care, that's cool too. If you got another way to support yourself and that's not what matters to you, that's great. I have lots of friends that just do their gig to make money so they can just play and have fun, play exactly with, and they don't care if there's one person in the audience or 100. And that's great too. But if you're gonna survive and make money, support a family, segue back, then you got to figure out a way to fill the seats. Yeah.
Musicians now, young musicians, and I'm not just talking about jazz, and just musicians in general.
Mm-hmm.
When I was growing up learning how to play, guys like you, or watching Rams, or whomever it might be, great musicians here that I would check out. When we were learning how to play gigs, we had to learn to play, a 2, 3, 4 hour performance. You had to have material together.
Right.
Now, when you talk to young musicians, like, they're struggling for like a 45-minute set.
Right.
That's
because
thoughts about that?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with just not having the access to other people to play with on a regular basis. Like, just sit down and jam, and sit for hours. I mean, at Berklee, like for instance. So classes went at 5, and then you could rent out ensemble rooms for 2-hour sections from 6 to midnight. And that's where you were from 6 to midnight every day. Learning tunes. We would play games. We would start on page 1 of the real book, and we tried to get to page 30. It's not always successfully. But I think, that's it. And then, a 4-hour dance, that's electronic dance music, That's what happens now. Not much sweat goes into pushing that button. But the people like it, it's energy. But like, it's a whole different world. They don't have to play a 4-hour dance. They go, it's more of a show. I'm playing a show. That's cool. But yeah, if you only have 45 minutes worth of material, I'll come hear you play. I'll come hear you a couple times. But if it's always the same thing, I might not come back because I've heard it, and it's find some new music. It's not like it's hard to find. Or write, whatever. Yeah.
I think it was. I can't remember where I was. It's someplace in Canada, but I remember going to a session, and every song, almost every single song, was roughly the same key and roughly the same feel and roughly the same tempo. And I remember, I think it was Duke Ellington was saying, you have to play different keys, you have to play different tempos, you have to play different feels, all that kind of stuff. Create difference within a set, whether it's a 45-minute gig or a 3-hour gig or
and
whatever.
Duke would have been a perfect guy, because he started at the Apollo and played for all those shows with the dancers and comedians, and if you really delve back into maybe some elegant big band music that's not familiar, tunes like Portrait of Sidney Bechet, and, well, there's a lot. And, I mean, you hear all kinds of different influence, feels. I mean, it's not like you're listening to the Count Basie Band. It was a different kind of thing.
Well, I mean, you mentioned, and again, these are all, we're just throwing opinions out here, but I mean,
Right.
because you've seen a lot. I'm 45. I've seen a lot, and there's a lot that I know, and there's a lot that I don't know, and same is true for all of us. But it seems like someone like Louis Armstrong, or someone like Duke Ellington, or someone like Nat Cole, right? I mean, yeah, they were entertainers, and it was a show. You know, we mentioned a show,
It was, yep.
But
They were
the level of
right.
prep that went into developing the music compositionally and performing
Was
and
their
the
whole life.
musicianship.
Their whole life.
Yes, or someone like Mel Torme.
Yeah, their
you
whole
know.
life. That was their main focus. That was their goal. That's what they lived and breathed for. From the time Duke Ellington woke up and he would have breakfast, he would have a broiled steak and a cup of hot water. That was his breakfast. And from that time, him and Strays, were writing tunes, and he was orchestrating, and I mean, all day long until the gig. And that's what he did every day. That was his life.
So I guess going back to,
It'd be interesting to talk to Duke Ellington about how he felt about, because he had Mercer, his son, and I there's another siblings too. I'm pretty sure about what he thought about that and how he created that. Because he was, I mean, talk about a guy who worked a lifetime away from home.
so I guess going back to comparing and contrasting, just like with the colleges, I mean, the level of show business then, and the people that I just mentioned versus now and what we have. I mean, do you feel like something is lost, something is missing?
In regards to all music or jazz in particular?
I guess we're through the lens of jazz. That's
Through the
why
lens
we're
of
here.
jazz. Through the lens of jazz, yeah, because
Not through the lens of Taylor Swift. That's a different animal.
Right. Yeah, I mean, people don't listen to the music as much. I do clinics and have students who are good saxophone players, good flute players, good clarinet players, but they don't listen to as much jazz. They might, and if they do, it's whatever is really like current hot right now. If that's your path, cool. I personally, this is just me. I don't feel like I can play like Benny Carter until I can play like Johnny Hodges. I don't feel like I can play like Bird until there's an order for my musical education that I felt like that I'm still on. I'm almost a Cannonball Adderley. I mean, I've got a ways to go. Times are running out. That's paying homage to the music. And doing it as correctly as I think it should be done. Because people lived and died for this music, and it's important to me. I think that part is missing. I don't hear that in a lot of young people's playing. I'm not saying they're not great players. They are, a lot of them. And their argument would be, well, that's already been done. I'm not hearing anything that's not, and what's going to be new? How about just playing musically, play with a good sound, write tunes, write something off the beaten path, cool, But I would say they just don't. I have a student actually. Who I talked to on the phone the other day. I said, finally for the first time in my life, cat's like 23, I don't know. I'm starting to really, really delve in and listen. Like this month, I'm dedicating to finding the earliest John Coltrane record, whatever, and to the latest. And I'm gonna involve myself in that and finally learn the music. I'm gonna just listen, and I'm just gonna listen to Bill Evans this month. I'm really gonna find out where they started, what they wrote, who they played with. I think that might be missing. If that makes sense to your question.
Yeah, oh, for sure. And Spotify doesn't help because it never. I mean, you can look. Through
But you have to kind of
years.
go back.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and if you're as tech savvy as me, oh boy, then yeah, it takes time. And in today's world, most people they want it right now. They don't really care who it is. It's like, well, so like as an assignment for a student, I'll say, I want you to listen to 5 saxophone players this week. And they come in and I'd say, well, what'd you listen to? Well, I don't remember their names, but, I mean, why do you want to remember their names? Well, you know, if you're trying to, like, learn the vocabulary of jazz, you might want to know, if you're playing a 1950s bebop tune, what that music sounded like, who played it, so you can go resource it, you know? I mean, the internet, you know, YouTube and all that is great. God, like I think I said, you know, to you before, if I would have had that when I was a kid, I probably would have never gone to school, you know, but there's some downsides to it.
I forgot to mention this earlier, but if anybody has any questions for Tracy or myself, please put them in the comments, and we'll get to them towards the end of the interview here. I want to jump back because there were a bunch of other questions, like all these questions that we are accumulating as we're having the conversation here. Going back to big bands back in the day, I remember reading about, I think it was Serge Shaloff.
With Woody?
Yeah, and I guess Woody wanted to fire him, but because they had issues with substance abuse and the rest of us in the band.
Yeah.
Well, no, that's not what I want to talk about.
Yeah, well,
what I want to talk about is he wanted to fire a couple of the guys in the band, and they knew it, so they basically just threw away the music, so there were no parts because they had everything memorized.
They did have everything memorized. I remember talking to, yeah, they did.
It was job security
It was
to memorize the music.
So, like, yeah, Stan Getz, because he had a photographic memory. Yeah, those
Charlie Parker as well, I heard, was
yeah,
the same.
I believe that's probably true. Yeah, I don't doubt that at all because, I mean, you know, that at that time, especially, you know, Woody's book wasn't huge. He was a fairly new band leader, and it had his hits, and that, you know, and that was kind of what it was. So those first cats in the band would have memorized all the music for sure. A lot of it was probably head charts, you know, for starters, anyways. That kind of grew into arrangements. But yeah, I'm sure that's probably true. That's funny.
No, I'm just thinking, not just that, because I'm obviously jokingly about, you know, job security, but I'm thinking having all of that music memorized, as we were talking
Right.
about, is a benefit to you as a soloist, as an improviser, as a composer. And I wonder, I mean, how many younger players now do you see? I'm linking this back to, like, you knowing the entire, like, or the majority of the charts from the Tommy Dorsey band and having that music memorized. How many students do you see that are taking the time to memorize music? I guess that's
a lot
what
of them don't even want to. They think there's 2 schools of thought, and maybe there's a middle school of thought. You know, you have to memorize the tunes.
I guess that's what I'm
Right.
getting at is
Right. And
memorizing melodies, memorizing chord changes,
Right.
memorizing solos,
Which
all
is
of
kind of what that was, and probably I would say probably is my path. But, oh God, I feel old now. You know, I remember when the real book first came out, and you had to go to the street corner at Mass Ave in Boylston, and, like, this guy would show up only on Tuesdays for an hour in a wheelbarrow, and you'd sneakily give him $20 and he'd sell you a real book, you know. Yeah. So there was no choice. Yeah. I mean, the only way to learn a tune, I mean, I guess you could have gotten the old sheet music, but it wouldn't have been the way you'd want to play it. Yeah. The only way to learn a tune was learning off records and learning it by ear and figuring it out. I mean, when the real book came out, it was like, you know, the holy grail. And so that has just, you know, moved forward. And so you know, these young players, they've got everything. They got their iPads in front of them. They got, you know, the music's there. And some do memorize, you know. But some just don't think it's important. Whether it is or not, I'm not sure. I can say it's important for me because I can't function very well unless that's happening for me. It's like even in classical music, like, you know, if there's a spot that's just wicked hard, like whatever, if it's 2 measures, 1 measure, 4 measure, whatever, like I just have to sit there until it's memorized. I can't focus on reading it. If I'm working hard at reading it, I'm not going to play it very well. And I think that's sort of spreads over to all the other aspects of my playing, or my thoughts, and my thoughts, I should say, in regards to memorizing. And I just think musical memory makes things easier. I was playing some concerto with a kid the other day, and I hadn't played this piece in like, I mean, I can't even remember when. And so there was this really hard passage, and I looked at it for about a minute or so, and I kind of went through it a couple times, and all of a sudden, I closed my eyes and looked at him. I said, here you go, and played it. And he's like, how'd you do that? I said, well, you know, my childhood was strange.
It was a simpler time.
It was a simpler time, much.
All right. Well, let's see. There was another question I wanted to ask you. Oh, well, no, we're talking about memorizing tunes, talking about memorizing solos, all that stuff. I mean, it's also a form of ear training and being able to hear.
Well, it's absolutely a form of ear training.
Through songs.
Yeah. You know, and you were talking about Berklee School music. Like one of the, I mean, my private teachers were great, but like the class that I got the most out of, I think I gained the most out of, was ear training. And because I'd been transcribing off records from the time I was about 14, my ear had started to develop, even though I didn't know what to call anything. And so ear training in harmony classes would explain, I go, oh, I know that sound. And they would say, well, this is what it is, you know, clinically. So it was sort of backwards for me. Now kids learn clinically, pretty much strictly in school, and then maybe they do the other part as they move forward. And I don't know which answer is better. I don't know. That was just my, you know, pathway. But yeah, that's huge ear training. I mean, especially, when you had to transcribe off records, it took a long time because there was no fast forward, there's no slowing down. I remember when I transcribed Kim number 1, it took me 2 months. I was sitting in the practice room, you know, from midnight to 3 every night for a long time. But when I was done, guess what? I still know it. I still play it. All those things that I can play them perfectly, almost. Yeah. Hands aren't what they used to be. You know? But yeah, and because it took that kind of process to learn it. And after all, it's music. It should be, you know, the ear should be a huge part of it. I would say more than the eyes. I would say, right? I mean, to me, but.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can relate because you had me start to transcribe when I was in high school.
Yeah, but you had a Walkman.
Yeah, no, I started on cassettes. We had cassettes.
Okay.
CDs came in when I was in high school. So even then, I preferred transcribing with the cassette. For some reason, it was easier on cassette tape than using the CD.
Funny.
So anyways, but I had done, you know, probably, and students that have studied with me, I mean, I've shown them the stack because I still have it of all the transcriptions by hand, you know. I'm trying to get some of them entered into the computer now.
Right now, these kids, it's look like a published piece of music. It's like beautiful. I'm like, wow, did you buy this? No, I wrote it on my computer. I'm like, oh boy.
Well, so anyways, I mean, but it was the same story because I had like maybe one semester. They had music theory, AP music theory for one semester, and then they cut it when I was in high school, at Stadium High School. So anyways, there was no music theory. There was no ear training. Just a little tiny bit to speak of, but it was all this transcription. So then when I got to college and I had to start doing ear training, all that stuff is like, again, I didn't know the names right away, but it's like, oh, it was super easy because I could hear it.
Right.
You know, and I think doing whether you are born into this world with some sort of innate ear training or a strong ear, musically inclined or not, and you've taught enough to I probably speak to this as well. I mean, some people are born and some people are not, but the more you work on this thing, the stronger that skill becomes.
That's right. And like all those things, like talking about musical memory, great musical ear, there are a handful of people that sort of this comes very, very easy for. But anyone, 99% of all people, I mean, when people say I'm tone deaf, I've only met one person in my life that was tone deaf, and it was my uncle. I can remember being in church with him when I was young. And I'd be sitting next to him, and he'd be singing at the top of his lungs these hymns that were just, I mean, I almost had to plug my ears. It was so bad. It was horrible. But he loved it. He would sing it at the top, and it's like, oh, you know, you start to slide over. But it can all be gained. I really believe it can. Is it faster for some? Yeah, it is. You know, when will I be able to improvise well? When you improvise well, that's when you'll be able to improvise well. When will I be able to hear these? When you do. There's no time. You know, in the world we live in, because of the you know, we teach our kids in school, math test, semester done. Okay, you know it. No, you studied for a test, memorized what you had to get through the test, and you might have retained a few conceptual ideas, but you don't really know it. You know, That's not how music works. Like when a kid comes in and says, I'm not really ready for music, I said, well, relax. I said, you'll be ready when you're ready as long as you're kind of going through the process. The process, not the product, man, is always the answer. You know, go through the process. You'll get the product. You might not get it as fast as you want. You know, and if you figure out a way to fast forward that, you let me know, and I'll pay you for that information because I like to know it myself. Yeah, yeah.
Well, here's another question for you. I have my own thoughts about this, but it seems to me, you know, I've been teaching now. I started teaching in 1996, 97. I don't even know what math-wise. It's been a minute, and you've been teaching longer than that. It seems to me that people seem to struggle the most with rhythm. Do you agree with that?
I agree with that. I think it's definitely one of the hardest things for young students, and not even just young students, but a lot of people really struggle with rhythm. I think because unless they start immediately with a teacher or a private teacher that's going to teach them how to count when they play, they're never going to learn how to count. I mean, you know, they're like, well, you know, so people say, well, do you count when you play? I say, well, I've seen music so much in my life that I can almost always just look and know the way it sounds, unless it's very complex. But if it's very complex, I got to break it down, and I got to count it out. And, you know, so you ask the student, are you counting while you play? What do you mean? I just know the way it sounds. I said, well, you're sounding wrong to me. So, like, you have to take them through and teach them how to count. I mean, grab their shoelaces and get their foot, you know. It's the funniest thing. I got a couple of students that they tap their foot at a different tempo than they play. And, like, I don't even know how that's possible because they're playing in time, kind of. They're sounding fine, but their foot's going different completely. Yeah, but, like, I have students all the time. I say, next week you come in, you write out the rhythms, and they're like, so we go through it, and you just got to teach them how to count. One of my very first teachers, in fact, you know him, Bill Forsyth. Yeah. I used to go up to Highland Hill Music, which used to be at Highland Hill. $4 a lesson. And there's this book called the H.R. Fussell book. And I'll never forget it because it was horrifying. Page 40 and 41. And every week I would have to write in upbeats and downbeats and all the counting. And I would have to clap it and say it perfectly before he would let me play a note. And then every week I would have to add a couple lines, and I'd always have to start at the beginning. If I made one mistake, he'd make me go back to the beginning every time, until finally, months later, and he wouldn't let me play anything else unless I could do it. So there were some lessons that I never got to play, even hardly anything at all. And I remember, like, even wanting to dodge my lessons. I can't go do this today. I can't stand it. I remember actually kind of hating it, actually. But by the time I finally got to the end of page 41 and I made it through it, well, I knew how to count, and so thanks, Bill. But yeah, people don't teach people how to count.
So, why do you feel, or why do you think that people struggle more with rhythm than they do with ear or learning notes or the rest of it? Why does that seem to be innately more of a challenge for people?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I have a great answer for that. I think because here's how your fingers see. Put your mouth like this. Hold it for 4 counts. Okay, well, that's great. But they're not taught, it's sort of the math part of music. I think people say music is like math. Well, okay, kind of. It is, with counting. It is. 2 plus 2 still equals 4. 2 half notes still equal 4. But it's interesting because I'm really bad at math, but when it comes to, well, I should say I'm really bad at current math. But I mean, fundamental math makes sense. Maybe that's a part of it because kids aren't taught how to supply, what's the lowest common denominator of 6? They're like, what's the common denominator? Their math is in words. So maybe there's something there. But I think it's I don't think it's that they can't count. I think they're not taught to count.
Yeah. Or it could be, it's like, I guess, like feeling time.
Feeling time is a whole different issue. So there's lots of thoughts on that, standing up, clapping, and marching in place, keeping pulse by clapping even when you listen to music. That's something that's sort of, do I want to say either you have it or you don't, or you can learn it? What's that movie with Steve Martin where he's like trying to...
The Jerk.
Yeah, where he's trying to so finally he gets the beat. I got it. But it takes him like years, to finally be able to feel the beat.
The process.
Yeah, right. So I don't know if it's something that's sort of just harder for some people to feel pulse, rhythm. I have to believe it's maybe just from not listening to enough music. I think that's always what it comes down to. If you listen to enough music, it's got to catch you. There's the great, in fact, I've seen it several times, but you've probably seen it. But I laugh every time I see it. There's that classic Harry Connick video where he's playing and the audience is clapping on 1 and 3. And finally, he's like breaking out in hives. So he inserts a measure, it's masterful, really. Inserts a measure of 5 and gets them on 2 and 4. And that's like relief sets in, you know. Jeez.
All right. Well, we're getting close to that time. So if anybody has any questions for myself or Tracy, go ahead and put them in the comments. I'll do my best to get to them. And since I'm running this here by myself today, sometimes the comments don't show up. So if I don't get to it, I apologize, but we can get to it after the fact. If not, I'll just keep barraging Trace with questions, which is totally fine. So, okay. Let's see what I want to talk to you about. Well, let's talk about the UPS Jazz Band. So you've said you've been doing it now for 10 years. Mm-hmm. So, and you've always had some marvelous guest artists over the course of your time there. Do you have any idea who's going to be coming this next year?
I can't say for sure because it's always who's available and who we can get and how that whole process has to go about. I'd like to get, who's the bass player, Marcus Roberts? Yeah. I know he's been on our list, and I really would like to bring him in.
Marcus, wait.
Marcus Miller.
Marcus Miller. Marcus Roberts, piano player.
Marcus Miller, yeah.
But that would be cool, too, if you could get him.
Yeah, it would. It would. So I'd like to bring in, last year we had Wycliffe Gordon. Wycliffe was great, and we had Grace Kelly, fantastic performer. I'd like to bring in a really heavy hitter improvisationally,
I've said it before, and I'll say it again, and I'm sure it's not going to happen, but I wish it would. Tom Harrell.
Yeah, Tom Harrell's great. I don't know how much he's traveling, but, yeah, he's a phenomenal player and composer.
Well, so for the powers that be at UPS, if they're listening, what would be like if you could do everything your way, what would be like your wish list of people
players?
you'd like to get? Yeah.
They're all dead.
Currently alive. Currently
alive. Oh, God, I don't know. There's so many great young players. I just heard Charles Stafford with Charles McPherson at Jazz Alley. He was great. Sean Jones, I really like a lot. Trumpet players. God, there's so many great saxophone players. It'd be cool to have Antonio Hart. I like him a lot. It'd be cool to have, it'd be cool to have Brad Meldau. I mean, it'd be cool, there's so many players. Christian McBride would be great to have. But it's hard to get those guys, And not all of them want to come out and play at a little college. But all the people that we've had, for the most part, have been great with the students. And they're very lucky students to be able to access these really amazing jazz musicians. Because for a lot of them, because most of them aren't even music majors. I mean, almost all of them aren't music majors. And so this might be the only time in their lives, that they get to kind of do this and see what it feels like. And that's the experience we're trying to give and trying to find people in addition that are, honest with the students, but also, encouraging and can teach. Yeah. So that kind of limits the path in some ways. Yeah.
Right. That's kind of a challenge.
Yes, it is.
Finding great musicians that, are world-class performers, but can also relate the information in ways that the students can understand and ingest the information and then take it with them.
That's just it. Because these students, and I'm not just, just in general, across the country. Like I said, they like what they call jazz. But they just don't listen to it much. They like it when they're around it. They like to kind of play it. A lot of them just think jazz is playing your part in a jazz band at school. They think that's jazz. Jazz is improvisational music. I mean, that's a facet, a form, a vehicle for it, to me. But so for a lot of them, this will be the only chance that they ever get to experience that, and I think that's pretty cool. Yeah.
I want to jump back. I'm remembering some of the other questions. There's all these questions I'm thinking of, and then we go somewhere else and I forget. I wanted to ask you your time in Berklee. We're going back to the early part of the interview, but when you were in Boston, we talked about the faculty a little bit and who was around in the student body, but clubs and places to go hear music. What were some of the places that you got to hear music?
Oh,
in
the
Boston
Willow
when you were
Jazz
there?
Club. Gosh, I can't remember the names of them. Oh God, it was Michael's Pub was great. What was the place in Cambridge? Jonathan Swift's, the Regatta Bar. When I was in Boston, I was lucky. I really was, because it was at the end. I was just on the end of like that sort of, I saw Freddie Hubbard play live in Boston probably 6 times. I saw Dexter Gordon right up before right before he died. In fact, I remember I think it was in Jonathan Swift. Dexter was playing. Great band, Kurt Lightsey.
Eddie Gladden?
Yeah, the drummer too.
Eddie Gladden?
No, not Eddie Gladden.
No.
It's going to escape my mind right now. He's so great.
Did you see the rhythm session with George Cables and Rufus Reed and Eddie Gladden? That one?
Yes.
That was the 1980s.
Yeah. Well, anyways, it doesn't matter. But I remember they took a break. Dexter walked out. He was one of my idols, when I was young. Show this. He walked out of the club and in the little bar next door, and I kind of I-spied him, followed him, sat like 4 seats, and just like watched him. Just like listened to him kind of interact. And I remember like that was a thrill of a lifetime for me. To be sitting that close to Dexter Gordon, I was like, geez. Yeah, but I saw Philly Joe Jones, Jackie Byard. They were gone not long after that. And lots of people. But yeah, there was lots of clubs that brought in all the big hitters, yeah.
Do you feel that that's kind of missing
It's
in
absolutely
today's
missing.
climate?
It's absolutely missing. Go to Seattle. Okay, I was just there last week. I saw Charles McPherson, great. But that's the one place. But to hear like, in fact, Dave Marriott was there. He's like, yeah, I had to come see this because this guy is like we played with Mingus. He's like, and none of us last forever. Life's short, gang. Take advantage of it if you can. But where do you go? You tell me. Right.
I don't know.
That's what, get young players to go out and see like these greats that have persevered over all these years that can really still play. And maybe they'll get more enthused about, really going out and researching these players, which is, I think, needs to happen. I think to be a good player, I think it absolutely has to happen.
I think that's optimistic, not to be devil's
Of
advocate.
course it's
but,
optimistic.
I present a lot of music,
Yep.
and I present great musicians.
I know.
And there's a lot of times young musicians come out, and they don't even, number one, they don't know what they're seeing. They don't know what to make of it. And that's, I don't know how to put my thumb on that, or how to
You might be
address
trying
it.
to fix something that can't be fixed. I don't know. That just might be the bottom line. It's not probably up to us to say whether it should be fixed or not. But that just might be the case. And I hate to say it, but it could be.
Yes, well.
Isn't that positive? Don't you feel better? Want to play the saxophone?
Well, okay, maybe looking at I don't know. I don't know about
that's frustrating.
educating the audience or.
Yeah, I know. Trying to get them involved somehow in another way. Maybe that's. Here's my advice to young musicians: figure that out. If you really like jazz, improvisational music of any sort, I would say, no matter what it is, figure out a way to get the audience involved in understanding. Yeah, and if you figure it out, I'll send you my email address and let me know. But yeah, maybe that's their gig. Maybe that's how the stars are aligning. I don't know. It's hard for me to understand. Like, if you play flute, I can't imagine why you wouldn't be listening to flute players or clarinet or whatever. But yet, the kids that are going to really pursue music, which are not that many, smart. But a lot of kids play instruments, but they don't listen to people that play their instruments. And I ask them, why not? Well, because I just listen to whatever's on the radio. It's because you don't have to go out and buy your music. it's just everywhere, and so you figure it's all free, and it's whatever it is, and I just live for whatever's on the radio or whatever's, whatever it is. And instead of being more selective about it, and going out and saying, because if you go, if a record, like when I was young, a record was $15, and like $15, I had to mow a lot of lawns to make it $15. And you have picked that album very carefully, because maybe you listened to the radio and heard someone and then you remember their name. How about that? And then you went and looked in that category. There's a stack of records this deep with Jackie McLean, and you search through and you find which one, what's the most players? How am I going to get most of my money? What tunes? That just doesn't exist.
Going back to, I'm not trying to step back what I said, but
That's okay.
Listening young musicians that come out, maybe do or don't come out, and if they do come out, they and see a great musician, they don't necessarily know what they're listening to or what they're hearing. Let's take Ollie Jackson for an example. He's been out here a couple times, and I know young musicians have gone to see him. I remember seeing him for the first time or hearing him.
In Gig Harbor.
The first time I met him was on a gig. I had hired him to play a gig. I didn't know who he was.
Right, because he lived out here for a while.
Yes,
That's right,
yes, and it absolutely blew my mind.
Yeah.
Even if they don't understand it, I think what's different about the greats, and you and I just talked about this a moment ago, and you could say, well, it's sound, but I don't think it's necessarily that.
I think it's that and the communication.
It's energy. It's the
energy
energy from the music that the music creates.
Yeah,
even if you can't put like a word to it, or you don't understand the theory or all of this history, it's the way that music is played that affects you, that draws people in.
I think that the energy is a big part of it, and I think the interaction.
And I think a lot of that is lost on younger musicians because of the lack of maybe the history. Like if they just start at modern musicians,
right?
Maybe some of that energy is. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm just totally.
It's a hard question to answer. I've thought lots about it. I'm not sure I have a great answer for it either. But yeah, I know like watching people play improvisational music, having fun, interacting, and having a conversation without words but through music.
And it feels good.
And it feels good.
And it makes you feel good.
Makes you feel good. Or it could make you feel sad. Yeah. It's intriguing. If nothing else.
We have no answers.
I don't.
Totally.
I'm trying to figure out my own.
We've been doing this for a long time, but still, I mean, geez, I don't know. Even talking to the older musicians, it seems like everyone's been having these conversations for a long time.
Seems like it. Maybe, and maybe there's not one answer. Maybe one answer doesn't fit all. Maybe that's the beauty of it. I don't know. I just know for me that without music, I mean, through life's ups and downs, it would be pretty difficult for me.
I have this conversation with people all the time. It's I've experienced these concerts, like life-changing moments. Some of them, like, people always expect when they ask me, like, what was your favorite moment in music?
Right.
And one of my favorite moments in music had nothing to do with jazz. It was a gig with you guys. We were playing with the Seattle Symphony, and it was the tribute to the Beatles. And
oh God, I forgot about that.
But I remember being in the ensemble, and it was being right behind the strings, and they played the opening to I Am in the Walrus in the orchestra, and just that sound. That was just an amazing
It's
feeling.
overwhelming, yeah.
Yeah, but being at other concerts where you hear this music and the way that it makes you feel, and you can't, it's hard to relate that into words to other people.
It's like, what does it feel like to play softly? Well, it's like, can you imagine exhaling at 13 miles an hour through the massive air, feeling 20 degrees this way? It's like you can't. It's a feel. How do you describe that? How do you put it into words? It's very difficult. Yes. I remember I had a soprano solo on one of those tunes. And I remember I played it perfect, except this one time I messed up. And I remember I was like, oh God. And I remember Cream looked over and he said, the conductor's staring at me like, oh no. I remember. Oh boy.
All right, well, it looks like there's a question here.
Oh my gosh.
The question is, who's a better flute player, Cliff or Kareem? Ha, ha, ha.
Well, it's not Cliff.
Well, I'm not that far, much further along the path. All right. Well, we gotta start wrapping up here. So I've asked you this question before, but maybe it's a new day here. Maybe you've got a different
Well, things have
different
changed
answer.
a lot in the past few years.
Yeah. So if someone were coming to you and expressing interest in saying that they wanted to be a professional musician, what is something that you've personally found very helpful in your own development that you would think is important for them to?
I can say, aside from all the stuff that we've already talked about, here it is. Develop your own sound. Work on your sound. Sound, to me, is like the most important thing, there is. Next is just really learn how to play your instrument. Technique equals freedom. Although you can have the greatest technique in the world and not be musical, but you have to have it to express, hopefully what you not only hear now, but as you grow musically, what you begin to hear later. A friend of mine said, if a Martian came down from outer space and wanted to learn about jazz, in 3 seconds, what would you tell him to learn? Thirds. Chords, minor thirds, all thirds. At its most basic level. Tell the Martian, thirds. Go out and listen to music that makes you happy, that inspires you to go home and practice. Whatever music that is. And listen. That's what I would say.
All right. Well, Trace, as always, it's
My
been a
pleasure.
pleasure.
Happy Father's Day out there.
Yeah, happy Father's Day, all you fathers. Again, thank you to all of our sponsors. We're going to take a very short break here and then get reconfigured and play some original music for you. Let's see. Tomorrow, we've got George Colligan's trio is going to be doing a live stream with us and an interview as well. And he's going to be joined with Eric Gruber on bass and Michael Rayner on drums, and I'll be playing at least 1 or 2 tunes with them. And then, let's see, there's a bunch of other stuff coming down the pipeline. We'll also be doing a little mini Pacific Northwest tour with Ollie Jackson coming up mid-July, so stay tuned for that. And it's been a pleasure, and we'll see you in just a moment. Thanks a lot.